Hello everyone and welcome back. I have another Superman Omnibus to show you. Actually, it's just a brief little comparison. This time actually it is the new Death and Return of Superman Omnibus that came out a couple of weeks ago. I just want to kind of briefly show you what's inside of this thing in comparison to the omnibus that came out a few years ago, which is this one, which is the second. But real quick, there have been 3 omnibuses so far that contain the entire Death and Return of Superman saga, or at least most of it. And now that this new one is out, from what I am hearing, this one is the most complete version there ever was. And up until that, this one was. And so yeah, and before these omnibuses came out, of course, there were various trade paperbacks over the years. And so yeah, that's that. Also, I just wanted to mention that the Death and Return of Superman is probably my favorite Superman story of all time. And the reason for that is because it's the storyline that actually got me into comics back in 1992. My parents got me a couple of the original issues from the storyline, in addition to the trade paperback, the original trade paperback that came out in the fall of that year. And I read that thing to death. And as I grew older, I began to purchase all of the single issues from the Death Saga, and mostly during the reign of the Superman saga, and of course pretty much everything after that. And so it's kind of like my entry point into comics. So this story means a lot to me personally, and it pretty much marks the beginning of my foray or whatever into comics, and it's the beginning of my Superman, the era that I grew up with, that is. So, that being said, as a result, I have probably several different versions of the storyline. Of course, I have 2 omnibuses here. I have the original trade paperback from '92. Of course, I have all of the single issues as well. And of course, there are some new trades that came out just a few years ago in different volumes. And I think I even have it digitally as well. So yeah, so this story really means something to me. So now I'm going to just kind of briefly show you a little quick comparison about these two omnibuses here. So hang on a second. Alrighty folks, and there it is, as you can see. So this one came out a few years ago, I think about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, possibly more. And again, it contains most of the Death and Return of Superman storyline. And of course, the biggest noticeable difference right off the bat is that they both feature different cover art. Of course, this one was by Dan Jurgens and Jerry Ordway. And I think this was back in 2012. So yeah, that's how long ago this thing came out. And then, of course, the new one basically just recreates the cover from Superman number 75, the famous Death issue. And both of them have dust jackets. So on this one, of course, mine is signed for the most part. The dust jacket comes off, and it's just a repeat of the cover image wrapped all the way around. And the new one, meanwhile, is this. Dust jacket comes off, and you get a whole spanking brand new image there, which I don't think has been reproduced before. So you have Doomsday, and there's Superman packing a punch, or with Lois and Jimmy there under the Daily Planet. So that's definitely something new, and from the looks of it, this looks like the art of John Bogdanove. And sure enough it is. So that's the first noticeable difference. And but now I'm going to just quickly go through some of the contents and go from there. So, real quick here, put this back on and put this one back. All right, so now the one on the left, which is the old one, contains the following issues. Contains Superman, the death, of course. It contains Action Comics number 683 to 692, Adventures of Superman 496 to 505, Green Lantern number 46, Justice League of America number 69, Superman Man of Steel 17 through 26, of course Superman 73 to 82, Superman The Legacy of Superman number 1. And there's some extra little things in the back there, like sketches and whatnot, poster art, and so on and so forth. Now the new one, on the other hand, contains Action Comics 683 to 692 and annual number 5. So that's the first new thing that's in here that is not here. You have Adventures of Superman 496 to 495 and an annual. So that's also not in here. You have Green Lantern 46, Justice League of America 69 and 70. So JLA 70 is in here, but not here, which I think is the memorial issue. Then you have Man of Steel number 17 to 26 and annual number 2, which is also not in here. You have Superman number 73 through 83, which is number 83 is not in here. And I think 83 is the Engine City Fallout issue. And an annual, which is also not here. You have Supergirl in the Team Luthor special number 1, which is also not in here. And you have News Time, The Life and Death of Superman, which I think parts of it are in here, or it might be in here as well. I think it is. And then you have Superman, The Legacy of Superman number 1. And of course, probably the biggest draw for many people, as it says down here, is the groundbreaking Fallout from Superman number 75, which has the whole pullout that the original Superman 75 had. So, based on this information on the back there, this has a little bit more than this did. And, yeah. You can see this one's a little bit thicker than this. So for those of you who are asking yourselves, should I upgrade? Why? I mean, I already have it, you know. Based on just reading this alone, it's worth the upgrade. But that's not taking anything away from this one because it's awesome. It's terrific. But yeah. So let me get this out of the way and then have a look inside of this. Okay, so as I mentioned, I got the cover art. We looked at the actual book itself art. You open it up and you have some clippings from the battle with Doomsday, of course. And some of the stuff was actually reprinted in the News Time special. So that's always kind of cool. And then something different here, which I don't recall seeing in the other one, is this Here Lies Earth's Greatest Hero, which was one of the things that was featured in the original Superman number 75, the polybagged edition there. And you have the falling cape and from one of the issues in the Funeral for a Friend storyline. And then you get the statue that was on Superman's tomb. And of course you have all your credits here for all the writers, artists, publishers, etc. And you have the table of contents. So just looking at that, you can kind of also see what's in here. So please feel free to pause and screen cap this portion if you really want to know what's inside and the contents of which. And then you have more of that here as well. So let me move this aside so you can see it. And the thing about these omnibuses, they are huge. They weigh a ton as far as books go. And they're kind of difficult to keep open. So if you let them go, they just fall shut on their own. And so, of course, it begins with the familiar crang, 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 boom from Man of Steel 17. Of course, you get more of Doomsday's fist pounding until eventually he breaks loose. And then finally we begin with Man of Steel number 18. So one thing I do want to point out is that on the back it says Superman and Man of Steel number 17. But the entire issue is not in here. And it was also not inside the previous omnibus as well. I think they only included the Doomsday portion, which is this part, which I think was like the last couple of pages of Man of Steel number 17, which technically is the first appearance of Doomsday, even though Superman and Man of Steel number 18 is actually the full-on appearance of him. So, of course, it goes right into it. The cover art has been reproduced, and the stories just remains the same. The quality is nice. The paper is great. From the looks of things, no errors in the artwork. So it all looks good. But one thing I want to jump right into right away is that, well, first thing I want to point out is that the reproduction of the Superman 75 newsstand cover, I think it's nice that they put this here. And also, I'm glad they produced the first, well, they produced a cover that was the first printing, because subsequent printings of this book back then had Roman numerals under it. And that's how you could tell the differences in the print run. So it's kind of nice that they put that. And then, of course, goes through the issue. And the main thing that everybody was asking about, or that everybody cares about, is this fold-out page, which, if I can get it without ripping it, uh-oh, be careful here. Oh, here it is. Gotta be careful, because you don't want to hurt it. Uh-oh, almost ripped mine. Gotta be careful with this because they seem to have put them together in a certain way. So yeah, as you can see, I kind of ripped mine slightly, but that's okay. The fold out page, which is awesome. That's how it was in the original issue. So, and then of course it ends that and jumps right into the News Time special. And then all of that, which was like an oversized, well, not an oversized, but it's just like a magazine that came out right around the time a bunch of different tributes and stuff came out during that time. And then you get into the whole Funeral for a Friend. And one of the issues that was not in the previous omnibus was this, which is Justice League of America number 70, which is the memorial issue. So that's cool. That's something new to this omnibus, right? And then we jump into the rest of the Funeral for a Friend storyline. And that just keeps going and going. And you have the Legacy of Superman here, which was a story that came out in between. And then this looks like this is all part of that. And let's see. Yep, there's Aaron from Cadmus Project. So that's that. So there's a lot of good stuff in here. And then it looks like we have the Supergirl and Team Luthor special. So this is the first time that's been reprinted. So that's nice. And then you have Adventures of Superman 500, which I believe is right here. And that's the newsstand cover, not the actual white polybag edition. So that's there. And then it goes right into the whole reign of the Superman, which begins here with action number 687, and just goes on and on all the way through, introducing the various Superman, Cyborg, Steel, Superboy, and the Eradicator. And so you get that, and then you get into the other storylines that are part of the whole thing, and then you get the Bloodlines annuals. So that's nice. Definitely something that's not in the previous edition. And so it's a lot of cool things here. And you have Action Comics with Guy Gardner and more on that. And I believe this is Superman number 79. And an appearance by President Clinton. And here is yet another annual. So that's cool that they put that in there. And also want to point out this whole Sasha Green thing that happened during his time. Basically, Lex Luthor II, who was in actuality Lex Luthor I in a cloned body, murdered his physical trainer because he said she said something condescending or wrong to him during one of the previous issues. And that whole thing, or the consequences or fallout from that whole thing would come back to haunt him in a storyline maybe a year or two later down the line called the Fall of Metropolis. So if you're a fan of Superman, definitely check that out as well. To my knowledge, this has not been reprinted yet, and I hope it does get that treatment soon. So you have the annual once again. So this book is jam-packed. It's got everything you can think of in relation to the Death and Return. And there's another annual there. So yeah, just commenting on the paper quality, it looks great. The art is nice and crisp and comes out at you. It's not newspaper print, it's actual glossy paper, which is definitely nice. And just kind of skimming through it, speeding through it really quick. And you get another annual there. Until I think this is the Green Lantern 46, I think. Yep. So 2 more issues after this is when Hal Jordan went mad and became Parallax. And that's all centered around this story. So if you're a Green Lantern fan, do check that out as well. And then, of course, it leads directly into Superman number 82, which is the return issue. And then after this issue concludes, you get into all of the various aftermath and bonus material that seems to be featured. So you have Adventures 505, which is his first day back on the job kind of thing. So you have all of that. And then you have Action 692, which is kind of a little bit more fallout from the whole thing. And then you have Superman number 83, which I believe is also the first time this has been included as part of this storyline as a whole. And that's it as far as the actual comic stuff goes. And now we have all of the bonus material, which is in the back here, under this banner and this page. So you have an introduction by Mike Carlin, who was the editor at the time. And a very nice guy, I have to say. And so there's a lot of stuff going on here. Explains everything that was happening around that time. So if you get this, please feel free to read this and check it out. It's definitely worth it. And then you have all of the individual posters that were included as part of the original run. So back then, I think Action 683, Superman 78, Man of Steel 22, and Adventures 501 all had these little posters that were included with the original issues. And you could pull them out and hang them up or do whatever you wanted with them. So it's nice that they were actually included here. So this is from Superman. You have Man of Steel. That's from Action. And this is from Adventures of Superman, which is actually Superboy in this case. And then you have, another nice thing here. These are the covers of the original trade paperbacks. So this is the original World Without a Superman, which is basically the Funeral for a Friend story. Then you have the original trade for The Return. And then you have like a wraparound cover from Superman and Doomsday, which is during the Hunter Prey thing, maybe a year later. And then you have this, which is also part of the Funeral for a Friend. And I also want to point out that these images were also in the previous edition. So this is nothing new there. And then you have, of course, the writers, artists, their profiles there. And then you have this, which is also in the previous edition. These two images of Superman and Doomsday were on a t-shirt, and I happen to have that t-shirt, and Superman is on the front with Doomsday being on the back. So that's definitely awesome. It would have been nice to have this as a poster, come to think of it. And then this was another image that was actually on a poster. So that's cool that they put that in here. And you have some sketches or whatnot here. And some of this was actually also in the other book. And here's some new, previously unpublished art of Superman fighting Doomsday with John Bogdanove as the artist. And you have colors by Glenn Whitmore. So this is the same image that's actually printed on the actual spine and on the actual cover itself. And you have the Eradicator, which I don't remember this in the other book. And you have some notes there and a nice, awesome sketch of the Cyborg, Superboy. This was also reprinted in the last book. And more on the Super Summit there, and more stuff there. And then here's the original Omnibus spread. So it's kind of nice they put it in here, so you don't really miss out on that. And then you have more of the Super Team stuff, and before the book concludes. So yeah, that, my friends, is the news, death, and return of Superman Omnibus. So the big question is, should you upgrade? Yes, you should. It is worth it. It has more material, it's more complete and more comprehensive. And it's thicker, and the wraparound from Superman 75 is worth its weight in gold. Again, if you get this book, it's something you put on your shelf, and that's it. This is not something you want to sit down and have repeated readings of, because again, the book is pretty darn heavy, and you know, if you read it so many times, I'm pretty sure it may fall apart. I never trust these things entirely. And so yeah, definitely get this. And it is the second omnibus to come out in the last few years, last 2 or 3 years, for the post-crisis John Byrne Superman. The previous being the Superman in Exile story. So I'm hoping that with the success of that one and this one, that there will be more of these things in the future. So yes, go out there and get this one. However, if you have the old version, that's fine too, because it's still awesome. There's nothing wrong with this. Of course, I am keeping mine because mine is signed by most of the team, you know. But a big difference is this is actual paper newspaper almost, versus this, which is more of a glossy thing. So that's, you know, but other than that, there's nothing wrong with the art. It all looks great. You know, it's still good and definitely worth having. And again, the back bonus stuff is still in here, so you're not really missing anything. All of the stuff is inside of the new one. But there's some good stuff. So if you have it and don't feel like double dipping, then don't. But meanwhile, this one's the one to have. And if you have any questions about it or anything, please feel free to drop a line down below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Until then, guys, until next time, up, up, and away.